Man, the knife community has changed, bruh. Things are way different now. What's going on, guys? Carter from Edged Mindset. I want to talk about something. I feel the urge. I feel the inner call to express my feelings on this topic and kind of open this dialogue. And I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say about it, especially some of you older guys that have followed me for a long time, and then some of you newer people. I think there's a lot of perspective to be gained here, but what I want to talk about, the topic I want to talk about is how things have changed, but not just how things have changed. Everything changes, right? The only thing that's inevitable in this world is change and what? Taxes and death and stuff like that. Of course, it's going to change, but my main point, though, is I'm very conflicted with the change, like probably more than I've been conflicted with anything else in my hobby world, at least in my fun world. Because I don't know what to make of it. On one hand, I think all the variety, the knives that you can get for the money now is astounding. You have so much to choose from, and everything is done so well that it's really just this remarkable thing you can take a part of. And like the 2010 person in me just looks at everything that's available with these giant eyes of wonderment and is like, oh my gosh, these are things that we dreamed of back then. But on the other hand, I feel it's a little bit diluted, especially being a knife tuber. Things feel a little watered down, sort of. They feel a little like Netflix. And I'll talk about that here in a minute, how I'm comparing the knife community with Netflix. But I somewhat have a unique perspective because I was part of that first wave of knife tubers, right? In the early days, or fairly early days of YouTubing, I kind of started doing knife stuff along with Cutlery Lover and Smoke Eater 908 and Jay Davis and of course Jeff Tough Thumbs. All those people, we started doing all this knife content. And back then I felt, and maybe it's just me, but I kind of felt like knife reviews were way more needed back then than they are now. Or at least the job of the knife tuber changed over the years. Because back then it was somewhat of a necessity. Because believe it or not, knives sometimes didn't work in those days. Flippers didn't always flip. Locks didn't always lock. And steel didn't always be stealing, if you know what I mean. So it was actually a very good service that we were providing by checking out these knives, biting the bullet, getting them early, and then testing them, seeing if they're centered. All kinds of things would be wrong with them because, like, machining isn't nearly what it is now in terms of precision and repeatability. But two, they were just kind of figuring this stuff out. Like, I told this story before, but early generation hinderers didn't flip, or at least they didn't flip on their own. It was all a measure of, if you got a hinderer, you'd have to measure how much wrist did you need to use to get it to flip. And I remember like the Gen 2s would come out and it was amazing because it was like, oh, you just barely any wrist and it'll flip open. This stuff wasn't what it is now. And so part of what the YouTube people would be to evaluate these things and say, is it worth your money? And also at that time, you just didn't have features. Like if you wanted something like this, it was only a custom. Most production companies, what you would get is plastic scales, steel liners, and then a satin blade. And that's it. Like Spyderco didn't have titanium. Like they didn't do titanium frame locks. Eventually they did. It trickled into production companies. But in those early days, you just didn't have any of that stuff. Whereas now it kind of blows my mind that you can get this for $275. This is top tier, like feature wise and quality wise. Let's be honest, quality wise, this is top tier work. This would have blown minds in 2010 if this came out. And it would have been thousands of dollars and it would have been a multi-year wait in order to get your hands on something like this. And now these are just in stock. Like, just go buy them. Even though, like, they made so many of these that even though it won Blade Show Collaboration of the Year 2024, they are still just in stock, sitting there, ready to be shipped out. There's no wait, nothing. For a very affordable price for what you're getting, a very affordable price. And that's not how things used to be. So it's very, very interesting. Back then, I feel that, I don't know, it's just a different dynamic. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time like lamenting about the past and blah, 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 but I'm just trying to frame what I'm going to say about knives right now, in the knife community right now. Because back then, everything had more gravity too. Like we needed to evaluate these knives because there was so few of them. There was only a handful of like truly interesting things that would come out from truly interesting companies. And also, let me frame this. I'm talking mainly like mid to high level stuff. I'm not touching so much on production stuff. So I apologize if that's kind of what you're looking for. I'm talking mainly, mid to high caliber stuff. Hinders, CRKs, Striders, the higher end Spydercos, stuff like that is kind of what I'm talking about. But it was a big deal to take something like a Sebenza and just lament about every single piece, the lockup, and theorize about how it's going to last and this and that, because this is all we had. This is all we had. And if somebody was going to get something like this, we really wanted to pour over every ounce of it. We wanted to test all the steel. It was a big deal because we weren't going to get another thing like it for a long time. So we wanted to spend the care and time to like pour over every detail of it and evaluate it. Now I feel like the problem is there's just so much out there, or it's not necessarily a problem, but what I notice is there's so much out there. Like, here, let me do it this way. So back in 2014, if I would have got my hands on a Sebenza like this, I'm sure I did, I would have done multiple videos talking about how it can be used and why I think this lockup is good or bad, or the steel. You might do a bunch of testing on the steel to say, how is their heat treat? How well does it sharpen? All of these things. You'd want to do that because this was like all that was out there. I mean, relatively speaking, right? So you wanted to take all that care. Now I feel like if I did that with this knife, if I did a bunch of videos on it and really talked about all the lockup, nobody would care because they're just be on to the next thing. There's hundreds and thousands of knives similar to this that they would be jumping onto, and nobody would really care to talk that level of detail about this particular knife. They kind of just want a once over. Is it good? Is there any issues? Do I want to get it added to my collection? Nobody's looking for super long-term testing on this knife. They don't want to see durability. They don't care to see 6-month update on use on this thing, because in 6 months everybody's going to be on to the next thing anyways. This is going to be old news. They're going to move on to the next knife. And I think it's a combination of so much saturation of knives that are available, as well as kind of the cheap price, because honestly, these things are just somewhat dime a dozen. And it's interesting. And this kind of goes back to my Netflix thing, right? So Netflix, in theory, is amazing, right? You have all of these options you can watch, all of these TV shows. That the bulk of them are trash, but if you're smart and you spend time, you can kind of weed out the trash. You can find the good nuggets that are in there and watch them. But the problem is if you're not that in tune with it and you go into Netflix, there's a good chance what you click on is going to be garbage, because most of it is just junk, or not junk, but it's just nothing special. And I feel like that's somewhat what the knife world has become. These things are getting cranked out so quick. Every company has 10, 15 models that are all good and they're all similar. For the most part now, knives just work. Like, I can't think of the last time I went to review or do an overview on a knife and I was legitimately like, this thing is no good, right? Like, it's dangerous, or it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, it's got a serious flaw. Now we're talking about like the distance between when it unlocks and it hits the detent ball, to say, oh, look at all this distance it's traveling before it hits that detent ball. Or, oh, this doesn't have a ramp. There's a chance you may feel that it doesn't have a ramp when you go to close it, which is on one hand amazing. It's amazing that that's the level that we're getting down to as we evaluate knives. They just work. And for the most part, they're good. You could literally take just about any knife, and if it's in your price range and you think it looks cool and it's the right size, it's fine. It's going to work. Like, is it the best knife you could have chosen ever in the world? Well, maybe not. Maybe there are a few little nitpick things. But most likely it's going to work for you and serve your needs. And that's it, There's not this big need to kind of pour over every detail of the knife. So it's kind of a weird conflicting thing because it's lost some of its specialness. You know, it's kind of lost some of its specialness. Like, I'm really impressed with this buckhorn here. It is a fantastic knife, but I also know it is going to fade away quickly, and into the next thing will take its place. And before you know it, no one will even remember what this knife is. The one that won Best Collaboration of the Year at Blade Show that everybody's talking about. That is a truly fantastic knife. It'll just be the next thing, the next model, the next design, and the next shape. And honestly, it'll just really be a minor tweak and iteration of what this knife already is. Different blade shape, maybe different steel, a couple little tweaks here or there. Essentially the same thing, because it's become such a, I don't know, we don't cherish the knives like we used to. You know, we don't kind of, I don't know. It just seems, I think, diluted and watered down is kind of the best way I can describe it. And like I said, I'm completely conflicted. On one hand, I think it's amazing that we can get all this stuff for the price that we can get them, and they're available, and there's all this cool, not really innovation, but there's cool artistic expression and different combinations of things. But on the other hand, I kind of miss the specialness of knives that they used to have. You know, this used to be special. This used to be special because there wasn't 1,000 other different versions of this knife. This is all you got. And so it kind of created a nice hotbed of YouTube discussion and talking about different things, and people wanted to know everything inside and out of that particular knife. And I feel like that's just kind of lost. So YouTubers now, I feel, have transitioned more into entertainment as opposed to legitimate knife reviewing, because it's not as needed. We've kind of got all this figured out. Knives just work now. We've got steels that are beyond what we dreamed we would have ever had. And it's all very affordable. So kind of an interesting thing to watch from my perspective, having been a part of those early days and kind of coming back. Just some food for thought. Let me know down below, what do you think of all this? Did that even make sense? Comment what your opinion is on the current state of the knife market and what it used to be. Am I just acting nostalgic here, or do you think there really is some legitimacy to kind of how things have changed? Comment down below. Appreciate you guys. Take care.